Hi, I'm Ernest Efri Smart, and this is Studywise, a cross-platform academic management application built with Flutter and Dart. Studywise helps students track their courses, tasks, grades, and study sessions, all stored locally using SQLite with no internet required. In the next 15 minutes, I'll walk you through every major feature of the app and show you how the core functionality was implemented in the code. So I'll start by first creating a new account. So I'll be creating a new account. So with the sign up form that has been set up, it's meant to validate every field in real time. So I'll show and use example of that. So here I'm entering a new user's name, John Asenso. Then I'll enter his email credential. So here I'm making a test of the validator. So I will put in an invalid email just to see how effective the validator is. So I'm making use of this bad email and I'm trying, and with respect to the password field, so I'll make use of a very short password just to see the full effect of the validator. So with that entered, I will attempt to create an account. So the validator is in full effect here because for the email section, it actually ensures that in real time, the user or the student enters a valid email. And if that's not the case, it raises an exception and requires the user to enter a properly accepted email. And with respect to the password field, it ensures that the user must enter at least 6 characters. And as you see here, it's less than 6 characters, which is why it raised that particular exception. The passwords must be at least 6 characters. So with that said, I'll re-enter the email credentials as well as the password. So jonasenso123 at gmail.com, and I'll enter a valid password. So and I'll re-enter it once more. So with that, I'll create a new account and it leads me to the dashboard. So on the dashboard page, it consists of a quick statistic. So for each of the stats, we indicate it consists of the overall GPA. So this will be automatically calculated every time a student inputs the grades that he or she has attained from the course. And then, of course, we have the total number of courses the student does. For now, it's empty because the student is yet to add a course. The same thing applies for the number of tasks completed as well as the pending task because the student is yet to create a task to be able to complete it in the first place. So moving on to the task page, we have the types of priorities for each task, that being high, medium, low, and then if a task is completed, that will also show here as well. So we could have a task with low priority and that is completed, a task with a medium priority and is completed, a task with a high priority and is completed. So with this feature, it will allow for me to be able to, that's the plus sign at the bottom right, it allows for me to create a new task, which will then appear once it's done created. The course section basically allows for the user to create a new course. So through the CRAD functionality implemented in this app, the student is able to actually add a course in order to get started with the app. The grade section basically allows the student to add the first set of grades that he or she has attained from a particular course. So it's easier to track the progress of the students. And also by adding a grade, there's also an inbuilt GPA calculator that automatically calculates the overall GPA that the student has attained from the courses he or she is doing. Moving on to the schedule session, it consists of a calendar, a real-time calendar, which allows the students to schedule studying events as well as assignments and examination timetables. So that way the student is able to actually plan ahead of time the set of activities he or she intends to do. So also with that, due to the CRAD functionality involved, the student is actually able to create a session making use of the real-time calendar. And then with the profile management page, basically the student is able to make changes to the current profile that he or she has set up. So here you could change the full name. So here I'll modify John Asenso's last name, adding another S. And by pressing save changes, you see that the full name of the student has been updated successfully. I could also proceed to change the current password of John Asenso. So initially the password was God is good, 123, but I'll change that to God is good, 1234, and I reaffirm that. So by doing so, I successfully have changed Jonathan So's password as well. So with that, this is how the Studywise app operates. And in the next section, I'll take you through an in-depth analysis of how the crowd functionalities were implemented for this app, and also the the code snippets that made it possible for vital features of the app to be implemented. So with that said, I'll be showing the crowd implementations that are existing in the Studywise app. So I'll start by first going to the course section and adding the course. So the course name I'll be providing is data structures. The course code being CS201. The instructor for this particular course being Dr. Smith. So the number of credits pertaining to this course is 3, and the semester that is being taken in by John Asento is in spring 2025. So the target grade for John is that he intends to score an A. So the course scholar here is meant to provide differentiations. It's meant to provide convenience with respect to the learning, right? So I can choose any course color. So I'll just stick with the blue for now. And then I proceed to add a course. So with that, the data structures course has been added. So now I'll proceed to view and edit the course as part of the current implementation. So upon clicking the edit, I will update the number of credits to 4. And then let's say I'll update the course code to 211. And so with that, I'll implement the changes. And as you see, the course code has been changed to CS211. And with respect to the number of credits, if we look further, see that it's been updated to 4. Yes. So proceeding to the next implementation, I'll proceed to add a task for John corresponding to the data structure course. So for the data structure course, John has been given the task to to complete to complete a lab. So yes, so he has been tasked to complete a lab. So regarding this particular lab, he is supposed to differentiate. He's supposed to implement. Sorry, he's supposed to implement a two-dimensional array. So the due date for this particular lab is on the Tuesday, 21st of April, 2026. So given the priority of this particular lab for John, given its high stake, we keep it to high. So the course in question, yes, is a data structure course. So for John, I've successfully added a task pertaining to the data structure course. Yes. So to indicate whether John has been able to complete the task, I have the completed option present. So if I, as John, is to successfully implement the two-dimensional array, I'll basically indicate it that it has been done. So I click it on the complete option, and it gives me a success message dialog that indeed the task that was created has actually been completed. So now when I go back to the dashboard, I see that now the not only is the total number of courses that I created, the data structure course being present, but now the task that John created to be able to complete the two-dimensional array is also done, and so it reflects here as well. And hence there are no pending tasks. So now proceed to add the grade. So the grade pertaining to the lab that was given to John to create the two-dimensional array. So John, at the end of the lab, scored a grade of 80. So the weight of this 80 is 4. And the category of the task was an assignment. And so the date that John received the assignment was on a Wednesday, the 22nd of April. And so with that, I we'll proceed to add the grade. So by adding the grade that got John obtained from the lab, you see that automatically with the GPA calculator, it has automatically calculated the grade, the weight of the grade that John got. So John got an 80, which is an 8. The weight was 4. So as a result, the overall GPA has now been updated to 3.20. If you go to the dashboard, you see that the overall GPA card has been updated to 3.20. So I'll also proceed with the current implementation of deleting an existing course. So I'll proceed to delete the data structure course. So by pressing this delete option, now the course that I initially created no longer existed. Now when I proceed to go to the dashboard section, the total courses actually reduces to 0 because that course no longer exists, which is also indicated here that there is no course here because of the delete action. So now I'll proceed to talk about various elements of the code that made or that contributed to the vital features that this Studywise app shows. I will begin with the validation logic behind the registration. So this particular section, the validation helper class, specifically the validate email, is mainly responsible for the validation logic for the email credentials for a user. So it makes use of regular expressions or rejects such that it's able to ensure or basically carry out that the user in question, whenever he or she is registering, enters the right email credentials. And the same logic is also a similar logic here is the validate password, which basically ensures that a user cannot provide an empty password or no password, and must be that the user enters a password that is at least 6 characters. As I illustrated when I was signing up, I entered a short password that was way less than the 6 characters, and so as a result, the validation logic actually cuts that out. Now regarding the encryption of the password, whenever a user signs up, whenever a user signs up, it makes use of password hashing. So here, this is in this particular section, the user's password is whenever the user's password is entered, this particular function is responsible for making sure that the password is encrypted and hence it is not easily read. So hence passwords are not actually stored in plain data or in any form that they can easily be tracked. Moving on to the login logic in the same auth service of that file. So here, the email. This is the logic for whenever an existing user enters his or her email as well as password. So the validation logic here basically means that the user can. So whenever a user enters the wrong email format or whenever the user's info was not found, it is the responsibility of this particular function to throw exceptions to make sure that the user enters the email format. And if his or her email credentials are not found, it the user will have to create a new one. Now moving on to how user courses are viewed. Moving on to how user courses are viewed and edited. So with this particular function, the update course, it basically allows for changes to be made to the existing course on the dashboard page, or basically the courses that were created by the particular user. Then the delete logic here, delete course function basically ensures that it is possible for a user to be able to delete a course whenever that particular user is no longer doing that particular course. And with respect to how a task is added, this particular function, the add task, is responsible for that. And with respect to how a task and changes are made to an existing task, it's the responsibility of the update task to ensure that the user is able to update the number of tasks in the app. Now, regarding how the state management was carried, it was carried through the multi-provider function. So it is through the multi-provider function that the state management concept was implemented in the Studywise app, and through the two change notifier providers, the UI. So through the two change notifier providers, this basically enabled for the UIs that were incorporated to the app to be powered up. In conclusion, this sums up my video demonstration on the Studywise app, its functionalities, code implementation, and logic. Thank you.